that God's love does not depend on the reinforcement He receives. It depends on Him alone. And that's why it's eternally sustainable. For us, with our human love, if it's based upon reinforcement, when the reinforcement dies, the love dies. That's why marriages fail. I mean, two people fall wonderfully in love with each other because they feel so good to be around each other, because they have their man or they have their woman. And they do love each other. They really do love each other. But they love each other for what they get from each other. And when maybe children come along and the finances get tight and life gets heavy and your interests diverge, well, the reinforcement stops. We no longer get as much from one another. And when our love is based upon that, when the reinforcement dies, the love dies, and the marriage fails. That's why our love, that's why our good is not good enough, because it cannot be eternally sustainable. When the reinforcement dies, it dies. Whereas God's love is eternally sustainable because it does not depend on the reinforcement. It depends solely upon Him. Notice this. In 1 John, John was the longest lived of the original apostles and a very close friend of Jesus and understood the way of life very, very deeply. And towards the end of his life, he's writing this epistle, this letter. And in 1 John 4, in verse 8, he says, "The one who does not love does not know God, for God is love." And he goes on to say in verse 19, "We love," why? Because He first loved us. Notice how even in our love of God, it starts out with reinforcement. It starts out selfishly. We don't initiate the love. He does. Why? Because He is love. And then we respond to what we receive from Him. God's love, because God is love and depends upon Him alone, is eternally sustainable. Ours is not. God's love lasts beyond the reinforcement. For us, we can only view the world from behind our two eyes. I mean, think of it, it's the way we are always. I mean, we're babies, and what happens? We're hungry and we cry. We're tired and we cry. We're overstimulated and we cry. We're dirty and we cry. Now, I'm sure Jesus cried too. It's the way that a baby would. How else would you know that he's hungry or whatever? But the point is that as humans, we view the whole world from the beginning of our existence from behind our own two eyes. Our world is egocentric. It is self-centered. We can only understand the world, for the most part, in selfish terms, other than when we have those glimpses of the original love and justice that God put in us. In fact, God even uses our selfishness to call us. Just like we read in 1 John 4 and verse 19. Just as it says here, we love not because we're so good, we love because He first loved us. Why do people follow a deity? Why do they follow their God? And usually, it's to get something. What do we want to do? We want to get eternal life. We want to escape eternal punishment. We want to get happiness and peace in our life. So there's some carrot that God seems to be dangling out there that we're going for. Or maybe a stick. Either we want to escape the punishment, or we want to gain the happiness and the peace of mind and the fulfillment and the eternal life, or whatever we think God has in store for us. We want it, and so we go for it. And that's why we turn to God. Now, the Christian journey may begin there. It's okay. It's about the only place it can begin, because by our very nature, we are selfish. But it mustn't stay there. If our Christianity is still based upon this selfish acquisition for self, if it's based upon the desire for power in the world to come, or for salvation, or for eternal life, or for happiness, or for anything else that's selfish, we haven't arrived at that end point yet. We're still living in a world of selfish love, even though we might call ourselves Christians. And although the process may be ongoing, and we may indeed be Christians, and God is transforming us, we haven't arrived yet. because even our love of God is still rooted in self. And that's what Christianity is. Christianity is the miraculous transformation of our very natures. It's the transformation from being selfish human beings to being selfless God. It's the transformation from our selfishness to the selfless love of God. The selfishness which manifests itself in evil, but also in good. But a good that's not good enough. The Christian journey is the journey from that kind of good and evil to the eternally sustainable love and good of God. Now, that may sound good in theory. We still need to bring it down to earth in our business plan. We still need to understand our terms more concretely. And to do this, we will see the greatest movement of God in all of human history. We will see this in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. There we will find the definition of our business terms. And when we look closely at what Jesus endured on earth, we will finally understand the difference between our human love and the love of God.
The Christian Journey book and the full-sized, full-quality, complete video series are available for free download at www.spiritualoutreach.com.